I don't know why I remember the sound of her thermos lid clicking shut. Maybe because it was too loud for the quiet room, or maybe because I was already paying attention to things I shouldn't. It was late afternoon, and the laundromat on Oak Street smelled like detergent and rain-soaked clothes. My friend had told me his mom came here every Thursday, same time, same machine. I hadn't expected to see her today, though. I was just trying to kill time, waiting on my own load. She noticed me before I could pretend not to see her. "Oh," she said, surprised but not unfriendly. "You do your own laundry?" "Yeah." I shrugged, rubbing the back of my neck. "Kind of a necessity." She smiled, half to herself, and bent to pour the detergent in. I caught myself watching the way she folded the little plastic cup, neat and deliberate, like she'd done it 1,000 times. We didn't talk much after that. Just the hum of the machines, the flick of her thumb scrolling her phone, and me pretending to read a receipt I'd pulled from my pocket. The silence wasn't awkward. It was something else, like a pause that stretched but didn't break. She spoke again, voice low but steady. "Your friend, he's been staying out late again?" "Yeah," I said. "Pretty much." Her lips pressed together, thoughtful. I wondered if she worried, or if she'd given up worrying. I wanted to ask, but the words stayed stuck. Instead, I noticed small things. How she rested her elbow against the washer door, the faint line of tiredness under her eyes, the way her wedding ring finger was bare but pale from years of wearing something there. When the dryer buzzed, she moved first. Her hand brushed past mine as she reached for the basket. Just a second. Skin against skin. I froze, pretending to dig for coins. She didn't mention it. Neither did I. We folded in silence. My shirt's clumsy, her towels perfect squares. At some point she chuckled softly, shaking her head. "You fold like a college boy." "I fold like someone who doesn't care how shirts look in a drawer," I countered, smiling despite myself. Her eyes met mine, warm, amused. A quick glance, then gone. But it stayed with me longer than it should have. When she zipped up her bag, she hesitated. Just a breath longer than necessary. Then she said it. Quiet, like she was telling me something small, but I knew it wasn't small at all. "This stays between us." I blinked, not sure what she meant. The laundry? The fact that we'd been here together? The way she'd looked at me just now? I nodded anyway. "Yeah, of course." She gave the faintest smile, a kind of tired relief, then pushed the glass door open. The late sun caught her hair as she stepped out into the street. I stood there longer than I should have, my basket heavy in my hands, heart light and unsettled. When I finally pulled my phone from my pocket, a new message was waiting. Not from her, obviously, just a friend asking about plans. But for some reason, I read it twice, as if I expected different words to appear. The machines droned on behind me, the smell of detergent sharp in the air. And all I could think about was her voice, low and steady, repeating in my head, "This stays between us." The following week, I told myself I wouldn't think about it. About her. About the way she said those words. But Thursday came, and somehow, I found myself back at the laundromat. Not because my laundry needed it. I'd barely worn half my clothes. But because part of me wanted to test if that moment had been real, or just something I'd imagined. She was there again. Same machine. Same thermos. She raised her eyebrows when she saw me, as though she'd been expecting me. "You run out of clothes already?" "Something like that," I said, forcing a half smile. This time, she sat down beside me instead of across the room. Her bag of folded towels rested between us, a small, ordinary barrier. She unscrewed her thermos, poured steaming tea into the cap, and after a pause, held it out toward me. "Here," she said. I hesitated, then took it. The metal was warm against my palms. I sipped, green tea, faintly bitter. I wasn't used to it, but it lingered in my mouth like something meant to slow me down. "Not bad," I said. She tilted her head, studying me. "You say that like you're grading it." "I'm not. Just different from what I usually drink." "What do you usually drink?" "Instant coffee." That made her laugh, quiet, but genuine. She shook her head, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Figures." It wasn't much, but it loosened something between us. For a while we just sat there, the dryers spinning in their slow rhythm, the sound filling in where words might have gone. At one point, She set the thermos cap down, rubbing her thumb across a faint dent on the side. Almost absently, she said, "I bought this when I was still married. My husband hated tea." Her voice was steady, but the words felt heavier than the casual tone suggested. I didn't know what to say. I only nodded, holding the warmth of the thermos cap like I was holding something fragile that wasn't mine. She noticed me watching and smiled faintly, but not in a way that reached her eyes. "Too much information, huh?" "No," I said quickly. I don't mind." Something flickered across her face, something unreadable, and gone too quickly to catch. We let the silence take over again. She leaned back against the chair, closing her eyes for a moment. I caught myself staring at the soft crease between her brows, the way her breathing slowed, steady, like she was letting herself rest for the first time that day. That's when it hit me, how wrong this was. Not wrong in the obvious sense, but wrong because it wasn't supposed to matter to me. She was my friend's mom. She was twice my age. She'd lived entire chapters of life I hadn't even started. But still, the thought pressed in, I wanted her to keep talking. When her eyes opened again, they met mine. Neither of us looked away right away. "You're quiet," she said. "I guess I don't know what I should say." "Then don't," she murmured. "Sometimes not saying anything is better." Her words sat between us, heavier than the machines, heavier than the smell of detergent in the air. I felt something shift inside me, like being seen in a way I hadn't asked for, but couldn't ignore. We didn't move closer. We didn't say anything more. But when her dryer buzzed and she gathered her things, she touched my sleeve lightly as she passed. Just a fingertip brushing fabric. It was nothing. It was everything. I sat there long after she left, the empty thermos cap still warm in my hand, wondering why my chest felt so full and so unsteady at the same time. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next time I saw her wasn't at the laundromat. It was her porch. I'd come to drop off a charger my friend had left at my place, but he wasn't home. She opened the door instead, hair tied back, loose sweater hanging off one shoulder. "Oh," she said, surprised again, though softer this time. "You." I held up the charger like proof of my innocence. "Just dropping this off." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in a second. He'll be back soon." The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something warm, bread maybe. I set the charger on the counter, awkward, like I'd broken into someone else's life. She poured water into a kettle without asking, like it was nothing, like this was normal. We sat at the kitchen table. Steam rose between us. She tapped her finger against the rim of her mug, not drinking. I noticed the way her hand stilled when I looked at it. "You shouldn't," she started, then stopped. Her eyes flicked to the doorway, then back to me. "I shouldn't what?" She shook her head, a tiny smile that wasn't really a smile. "Doesn't matter." The silence pressed in. My chest felt too tight. I wanted to say something, anything, that would cut through it. But the words never came. That's when the front door slammed. My friend's voice called out, careless, unaware. She shifted immediately, sitting straighter, her mug finally lifted to her lips like it was the only thing she'd been doing the whole time. He came into the kitchen, grinning, nodding at me. "Man, what are you doing here?" "Dropping this off," I said, pointing at the charger. My voice sounded thin, too quick. "Cool," he said, grabbing it, already distracted. "Thanks." I left soon after, though she didn't look at me when I stood. She kept her eyes on her mug, both hands wrapped around it like it anchored her. On the porch, I paused. The late sun caught in the window, and through the glass, I could see her. Just for a second, her shoulders slumped, her hand pressed to her forehead, like the moment I walked out had taken something from her. I almost went back inside. Almost. Instead, I walked down the steps, every footfall heavier than it should have been. That night, lying in bed, I kept replaying it, the unfinished words, the half-smile, the way her eyes searched mine before the door opened. We hadn't crossed any line. Not really. But it felt like we'd been standing on the edge of one. And part of me wondered if she'd have let me fall, if he hadn't walked in just then. That it was one of those evenings where the air felt too still, like the day hadn't quite decided whether to end or hold on. I was cutting through the park on my way back from the store when I saw her sitting on a bench. Alone. She looked up when I stopped. No surprise this time, just a tired kind of acknowledgement. You walking home? Yeah, I said. Then, after a beat, can I sit? She shifted slightly, enough space for me. The grocery bag crinkled in my hands as I set it down by my feet. For a while, we just watched the path, people drifting by, joggers, kids on bikes, a couple holding hands. Funny, she said finally, her voice low. When I was your age, I thought life would feel clearer by now. I turned to look at her. She was leaning back against the bench, arms crossed loosely, eyes fixed somewhere in the distance. Does it? I asked. She let out a soft laugh, not amused. No. If anything, it's harder. You realize clarity isn't coming. You just keep walking anyway. Her honesty unsettled me, not because it was dark, but because she'd chosen to share it with me. I don't know, I said, fumbling for words. You seem sure of yourself. Her gaze slid to mine, steady. That's just practice. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It was charged, like both of us had said too much without saying enough. She shifted again, rubbing her hands together. You shouldn't be here with me like this. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. Do you not want me to be? She hesitated. Her jaw tightened, then loosened. That's not the point. The faint sound of kids laughing carried across the park, their voices high and careless. I wished I could be that careless. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. Not when her eyes flicked down, not when she caught her lip between her teeth, like she was holding back words. I keep thinking, she said softly, about how this looks, about what it means. And it's dangerous. For both of us. I wanted to ask why she kept letting it happen then. Why she hadn't just walked away the first time. But I didn't. Instead, I heard myself say, I don't care. The words came out quieter than I meant, almost lost in the air, but they hung there. She blinked, her shoulders stiffening. That's exactly what scares me, she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word. Just slightly. Enough to undo me. We sat there, both of us staring at nothing. My hands curled into fists on my knees. Hers stayed folded in her lap, still, but trembling faintly. Finally, she turned, and for the first time, she didn't look guarded. She looked raw. You don't know what you're doing. Then tell me, I said. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head like she wanted to break free from her own thoughts. The distance between us was barely an arm's length, but it felt like something I could fall into. My chest hurt from holding everything back. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, burying her face in her hands for a moment. When she looked up again, her eyes were red-rimmed but steady. You'll regret this, she said. I wanted to answer, to tell her I wouldn't, that I couldn't, but the words died in my throat. The grocery bag rustled when I shifted, the sound absurdly loud in the stillness. She almost laughed at it, a small, broken sound that wasn't really laughter. Then she looked at me again, long and unflinching, like she was searching for something. Why are you here, really, she asked. The question hung there, too sharp, too honest. And I had no answer. Not one I could give without changing everything. The week after that night on the bench, she wasn't at the laundromat. I sat there anyway, basket at my feet, watching the machines churn. My phone buzzed twice, both messages from friends asking about plans. I left them unanswered. By the second Thursday, I started telling myself it was a coincidence. People change routines. Maybe she switched days, maybe she'd bought a new machine for the house. But when the third Thursday came and went, the coincidence felt more like choice. I thought about knocking on her door. More than once, actually. I even walked past her street, slowing down like maybe she'd just step out, thermos in hand, some small smile ready for me. But the house stayed closed, curtains drawn against the late afternoon sun. When I finally did see her again, it wasn't where I expected. I was walking home one evening, and she was on her porch, talking to a man I didn't recognize. He was older, late 40s maybe, with a neat shirt tucked into his jeans. They stood close enough that their voices carried low, private. She laughed at something he said, soft, quick. Not the laugh she'd given me over instant coffee, but real enough to make my chest tighten. She noticed me before he did. Her smile faltered, just slightly. She touched the man's arm and murmured something I couldn't hear. He nodded, walking down the steps toward his car. She stayed on the porch, arms folding across her chest as if bracing herself. "Hi," I managed when I reached the gate. "Hi," she echoed, but it came out clipped. "Friend of yours?" I asked, nodding toward the retreating car. She hesitated. Too long. Then, "Just someone I used to know." The words didn't land right. Not because they were untrue, but because they carried weight she didn't want to unpack. I waited for her to add something. She didn't. Instead, she said, "You shouldn't keep stopping by." It wasn't cruel, just firm. Final almost. I wanted to argue, to say I hadn't really been stopping by, just passing through. But my throat locked up. I shoved my hands into my pockets and nodded like I agreed. That night, lying in the dark, I tried to make sense of it. I thought about the bench, about the way her voice cracked when she told me I'd regret this, about the touch on my sleeve, the thermos shared between us. Were those things just small accidents I'd built into something bigger? My phone screen glowed in the dark. I typed out a message. "Are you okay? Did I do something?" I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over send. Then I deleted it. 2 nights later, my friend mentioned offhand that his mom had been seeing someone. He said it with a half grin, like it was good news. "About time, right?" he added, already moving on to another topic. I nodded, forcing a neutral sound out of my throat. Something like agreement. But my stomach twisted. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The next Thursday, I walked past the laundromat, basketless, hands shoved deep into my pockets. Inside, machines hummed like they always had. One seat was empty, like it had been waiting. I kept walking. It was raining when it finally happened. Not a storm, just the kind of steady rain that soaks through clothes before you realize. I was walking back from class, hood pulled up, when I saw her again. She was standing at the edge of her driveway, groceries in hand, fumbling for her keys. For a second, I thought about just passing by, pretending I hadn't noticed. But she looked up, and it was too late. Our eyes caught, and neither of us looked away. "You'll get sick," I said, nodding at the rain. She almost smiled. Maybe that's the point. I took the bags from her hands before I could stop myself. She didn't protest, just unlocked the door and stepped inside. I followed, dripping on the mat. The house smelled the same, lemon cleaner, faint tea. Familiar and not. "Leave them on the counter," she said softly. I did. For a moment, we just stood there, the rain a steady percussion on the roof. She leaned against the sink, arms folded. I stayed by the counter, hands shoved in my wet pockets. Finally, she exhaled. I thought it would be easier if I just disappeared for a while. I swallowed. Was it? Her laugh was small and bitter. No, the words hung there. I didn't move closer, but I didn't look away either. She rubbed her temple, then lowered her hand slowly. "You have to understand. This," her eyes flicked to me, then away. "It can't be anything. You know that, right?" I nodded, but my chest tightened. "I know. Then why do you keep showing up?" I opened my mouth, then shut it. The truth felt too big, too clumsy. I looked down at the floor, then back at her. "Because it doesn't feel like nothing." Her shoulders stiffened. For a moment, I thought she'd tell me to leave. Instead, she pressed her hands against the counter, steadying herself. "You're just a kid," she said. "I'm not," I answered, sharper than I meant. Then quieter. "I'm not." She studied me, eyes searching, like she was weighing the risk of believing me. The silence between us stretched. My pulse was loud in my ears. Finally, she whispered, "You don't know what it costs." I wanted to argue, to say I could handle it. But her face, tired, lined with something heavier than age, stopped me. She'd already paid costs I couldn't imagine. So instead I said, "Maybe I just don't want you to carry it alone." Her breath caught. Just for a second. She turned her face away, blinking hard. When she looked back, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "You'll regret this," she said again, like it was the only defense she had left. "Then let me?" I whispered. The room went still. No machines humming, no footsteps, just rain against the glass. And then she reached out. Not far, just enough that her fingers brushed mine where they rested on the counter. Barely there, but enough. Neither of us moved after that. We just stayed like that, the faint pressure of her hand against mine, holding the moment still. Her lips parted like she might say something else. Instead, she shook her head, almost smiling. Okay, she breathed. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a beginning. It was just two people standing in a kitchen while the rain kept falling, letting themselves be seen. And somehow, that was enough. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a single moment where everything shifted. More like small changes, little adjustments, until I realized we had quietly stepped into something neither of us had planned, but both of us had chosen. Weeks passed, then months. We didn't meet at the laundromat anymore. She bought a machine for the house. I still caught myself passing by on Thursdays, out of habit, but now it was her porch light I looked for, not the hum of dryers. Sometimes I'd stop in after class. Not every day, just when it made sense, when the hours bent in that direction. She'd put on tea, the same green kind that still tasted faintly bitter to me. I'd drink it anyway. She teased me once, saying I always looked like I regretted it. I told her I was learning to like it, and maybe I was. Other days, I made the coffee. Black, instant, nothing special. She'd take a sip, wrinkle her nose, but drink it without complaint. It became our quiet trade-off. Her tea, my coffee. Two people meeting in the middle. We walked sometimes. The park bench still there, waiting. We didn't talk about that night. The one where everything almost tipped over, but we carried it with us, unspoken. She'd sit with her hands folded, and I'd notice the way her shoulders softened in the fading light. Like being beside me wasn't a battle anymore. Not everything was easy. My friend didn't know. Maybe he suspected, maybe not. But she and I had an unspoken rule. No explanations, no defenses. What we had wasn't for anyone else to understand. She told me once, in a quiet moment, that she still woke up some mornings expecting to feel regret. But then, she said, looking at me across her kitchen table, I don't. I didn't answer right away. I just reached for the thermos cap she'd set down, turning it in my hands like I used to. Small things stayed with me. The sound of its lid clicking shut. The way she folded napkins neatly, even when we didn't need them. The clock on her wall that always hit 8:47 when I noticed it. Ordinary markers of something that had stopped feeling forbidden and started feeling lived in. We never called it love out loud. Maybe because saying it would have made it sound like something bigger than what we wanted it to be. What we had wasn't about declarations. It was about the ordinary. A grocery bag carried in, a sleeve brushed in passing. The way her eyes softened when she caught me looking at her hands. One evening, long after the rain had ended and summer had slipped into a quieter season, we sat in her living room. No words, just the sound of her kettle hissing in the background. She leaned into the arm of the couch, head tilted slightly toward me. I sat close enough that our shoulders touched. When she looked at me, it wasn't with hesitation anymore. It was calm, steady, like she had already chosen, and all that was left was to live inside that choice. I smiled. She smiled back, faint but sure. We didn't need to say anything more. And maybe that's what stayed with me most, that something so complicated could finally feel simple. That two people who had every reason to stop found a way to keep going anyway. A quiet ending, not perfect, but ours. I don't know if anyone else would understand. But maybe that was the point.